Welcome to Dr. Bobby Hill's podcast, where you'll hear impactful teachings rooted in Scripture, shaped by years of following Jesus and serving as a pastor and teacher. These messages offer practical insights for living out the Christian faith in today's world. Let's dive into today's message, Bible-centered, practical, and powerful, with Dr. Bobby Hill.
In the life of Jesus Christ, he introduced people to himself by saying, I am that I am, in order to help them understand how to relate to him in a personal, intimate way. In John's gospel, we have 7 great I am statements. For example, he said, I am the good shepherd. I am the bread of life. I am the resurrection and the life. Today, we're wrapping up our series on Jesus as the true vine. This is the 3rd in the series. Some people just want to visit Jesus. They don't want to spend time. They don't want to spend long. They just want to visit Jesus, and that's enough. Some of you have been used to you just want to drop in and visit Jesus on Sunday morning for an hour and a half. The rest of the week, all that's different. Some of you, you've been visiting Jesus just as you say grace over your meal. But that's where it stops. Jesus is not just interested in a short visit. He wants communion. He wants deep fellowship with you. Listen, some of you just want to date Jesus, but he wants a ring. Some of you pimping. To be honest with you, that's kind of blunt, wasn't it? No, it's not about just visiting Jesus on Easter and Christmas. It's about having a consistent interchange, fellowship with him. The abiding, this abiding that we're talking about, this hanging out, always will manifest itself in fruitfulness. The result of hanging out with Jesus is that you will be productive and you will bear fruit. He that abides in me, verse 5, he that abides in me and I in him, the same brings forth much fruit. It is the natural consequence. It's just the natural consequence of you abiding. And that's what he wants. Charles Spurgeon once said, he said, fruit bearing is impossible without abiding, but it is inevitable with abiding. That is so true. Now, I just have a few moments, so I want to close with a couple of illustrations. All right? So, years ago, in my early stage of ministry, I had the privilege of moving to Northern Ireland. Some of you know my story. So I lived in Northern Ireland, and then I moved and lived in England. And when I arrived in Northern Ireland, I was introduced to drinking tea, not iced tea. As a good Southerner, I knew iced tea. But this is hot tea. Now, you have to understand, I have never, ever been a coffee drinker. Now, how many of y'all are coffee drinkers? Raise your hand. Okay. Yeah. So you're looking at someone, I know it's shocking. I know it's close to blasphemy to some of you. You think that? I know you think less of me because of this. I have probably consumed a half a teaspoon of coffee in my entire life. Sure. That's why I'm so holy, see? That's why I'm so holy. No, don't ask me why, okay? Maybe because I wasn't in the Navy. I didn't go to college early. I don't know. There's probably some very genuine reasons, all right? But whenever I moved to Northern Ireland, they never even asked me. They just poured my tea. Wow. So I developed a joy for drinking tea, right? Now, My mom, when I came back, I moved back to the States. My mom, she was not a coffee drinker. I said, Mom, you've got to learn to drink tea like I did. And so I got her into the habit of drinking tea. She became a tea sipper as well. All right? So here's the difference between Mom and me. There's different ways to consume tea. I'm talking hot tea now. Forget the iced tea. There's different ways to prepare and drink tea. There's two kinds. The first kind of people are what I will call dippers. Dippers. A dipper is someone who prepares the hot, steaming hot water, and they unpackage the tea bag, and they place the tea bag in the hot water, and then they pull it out, they put it in there for a moment, they pull it out, then they drop it back in there, and they pull it up, they dip it in there, and they keep dipping until it's just at whatever concentration that they want, and then they're not through. Listen, dipping takes a lot of work. So it's a lot of work. And then when you dip it out, then you have to take the tea bag, and then you got to find a spoon, and you got to wrap it around the spoon to make sure you get all the tea out of the tea bag, and then you got to find a place, where am I going to put the old tea bag? It's a lot of work involved in being a dipper, let me tell you. But I have always been a dipper. Not what some of you are thinking about dipping, all right? A dipper with tea, all right? There are also the second kind of tea consumers. My mother was one of these. And that's what I'll just call a soaker. So there are dippers and there are soakers. And the soaker is one who opens up the tea bag, puts it in the hot tea with the hot water, and that hot water is made for tea. I mean, they're made for one another. They get along with one another. And you put the tea bag in there, and the hot water just transfuses through the tea bag. And over time, if you just let it sit and let it steep, the tea will come out of the tea bag, and you can just enjoy that. And my mom would just leave that tea bag in there, and she'd just leave it in there until she was finished with a whole cup of tea. And she was just as happy as she could be. She was a soaker. Not near as much work involved in that. Is anybody getting my illustration here? So there are too many Christians that are dippers, not soakers. And they think they can just be dipped in momentarily, dipped into the presence of the Lord, and then pulled right back out. And then dipped in next Sunday and then pulled back out. Now and then I have a chance to read the Bible, and I'm dipped into my relationship with Jesus a little bit more, and then back out. It's a lot of work going on to be dipped, to be a dipper when it comes to your union with Jesus Christ. Y'all are not talking to me much today. Come on. I know I'm preaching better than that. But you need to be a soaker. You need to be one that the tea bag simply is in the water. They're made for one another, and the water flows in and out, and it doesn't take the same work, but the result is quality tea. Some of you need to learn to be a soaker in your walk and fellowship with Jesus. It's all about how much you're soaking. Is anybody listening to me today? Yeah. Years ago, when I used to, when our children were much younger, they're two sons, they're 2 years apart. And from the time that they were very young, whenever I would travel and go overseas, or particularly overseas to another country, I would bring them back a token, a gift, a small gift. Never expensive, never a big deal, but I'd bring them back something, right? So it didn't matter whether I was in, South America, or whether I was in, wherever I was, I'd bring them back a little token, right? So they got to where they knew it was coming. And when Dad would show back up at home, you can imagine what they were doing, right? They thought about one thing like, what did you bring us? They would actually go and start opening up my baggage, looking at my luggage, and I'm thinking, what about me? What about me? I'm back home. I've been gone a week. All they were caring about was what? The stuff that I brought them. You know what? And that repeated itself for a while. It got to the point that my boys grew up and they actually would say things like, so Dad, when are you going on your next trip? They wanted to get me out of town. They wanted to get me to the next place. Why? Because they were thinking about the blessing that I was going to bring them. They lost sight of what was really the most important thing, was having Daddy home. And they were interested in the perks that came with when Daddy came home. And too many of you do what you do for the blessing rather than your fellowship with the giver. It's all about your walk with, union with, remaining with, abiding with the Lord. I'll close with this reminder. When you study the solar system, we learn some important things. We learn that the planet in the solar system that is closest to the sun is named Mercury. Everybody say Mercury. And what you learn about Mercury is that it is a hot planet. It's always hot. Why? Because it's so close to the sun. But on the other end of the spectrum, there is a planet called Pluto. And Pluto is freezing cold and is always cold. Why? Because of the distance it is from the sun. And then there is planet Earth. And planet Earth, the temperature changes because of the spinning of the planet. And it depends on what season it is. Whether it's hot or whether it's cold. Christians fall into those categories. There's some Christians that are hot for Jesus and remain hot because of their proximity to the S-O-N. Come on, someone say amen. And there's some Christians that seem to be always cold because they don't have close union with the sun at all. They're way out there. And then there's always some Christians just like planet Earth that sometimes they're hot, sometimes they're cold. It just depends on what season they're in, and they're up and they're down. They're seasonal saints. But God doesn't want you to be seasonal. He doesn't want you to be cold like Pluto. He wants you to be hot like Mercury, and hot because you're close to the sun, S-O-N.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Dr. Bobby Hill's podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and follow Dr. Hill on social media for more inspiration, insights, and updates. For more information on his ministry roles and resources, visit drbobbyhill.com.